Now the next part, and probably the most painful part of the process. I've done my research. I've assessed my business. I've found work projects that I think fit right in our wheelhouse. How do I become a federal contractor, either as a prime or a subcontractor? And I think this is the part where, like I said in the past, our contractors had the most agita and fear and
Sure.
kind of, and sometimes maybe misgivings on the overall process. So if you can expand on the tooth pulling part of the process.
Yeah, you're right. So the transition from the first part of our conversation to this, one of the things that I would recommend is that somebody in your organization has to be the belly button to do what we're going to talk about next.
Or within the contractors.
Yes, within their
business.
Yeah, within their business. So if you're a business and you're thinking you want to be in the federal procurement space and bid on opportunities, you have to have somebody that is their
dedicated to that. Yes.
Not necessarily 100% full time, but that has to be a core responsibility because these things take time, they take energy, they take learning.
And that person needs to be educated and up to date on the process.
And if that doesn't happen, and you just give somebody an additional duty, hey, go take care of this, your chance of success is not going to be the same. There are a variety of things that you have to do. You have to register with the government. If you go to the System for Acquisition Management, SAM, it will lead you through step by step the things that you have to do to get registered. You'll have to get a unique entity identifier. That's a 12-digit code that says, I am this contractor versus somebody else. You'll have to get a cage code, a commercial and government entity code. These codes are used to track businesses and spending and contracts in various data systems. But they also identify you uniquely so that you're not confused with the business down the street, and your contract is always going to be your contract. So those become very important. In that registration process, you'll have to report your size. You'll have to report how many employees you have, because in some opportunities, they're set aside for a small business. Small businesses are typically 500 employees or less, or 7.5 million in revenues or less. There are exceptions, and that's not always the case.
And I'm sure there's set-asides for minority-owned businesses.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, right?
There are different programs. So that's why it's important to register. Are you a woman-owned business? Are you a veteran-owned business? Are you a service-disabled veteran-owned business? And if you walk through it step by step, and you have that person that I was talking about earlier that takes the time to learn and go through it, it's not as bad as you think.
Is this a one-and-done deal where if you're looking to bid a number of projects, does this process have to be done on each of those projects?
No.
But once you do it, once you're established in the database, you're good to go.
Yeah, once you're established, you're in the database, you're good to go. You do have to maintain it. So from time to time, you'll have to do updates on an annual basis, that sort of thing.
What is the time period from your submittal to hearing? I'm assuming you hear something back officially that you're approved. What's the time frame in that?
Usually within a week to 10 days. You're going to get an immediate response when you push enter, but it's usually very quick that you'll get.
And then going back to the actual filling out the process, and I don't know if you can answer this, but if you had to put an hours on it, is it something that can be done by a person who is kind of, educated on the process, sits down in front of their computer? Is it something that can be done in 4 hours, 8 hours? I know it's kind of
you're right. It varies. It depends. I would say that if you have somebody that's their job, and they were to do nothing but that, and they had all the available information they needed to answer all the questions, you could do it in a day.
Okay.
Yeah. Typically, I'd say because the person doing this might need to go get some financial information from the finance office or something. You're talking a week at the most.
And the process doesn't change based on the project, like the size of the project, right? It's just
It doesn't change. Once you're registered, you're registered. You just have to update it and maintain it. And it will hold for small procurement, micro purchases that the government can buy with a government credit card, to simplified purchases, to huge multi-million-dollar contracts. The process is done.
Let me ask you this. In the case where the feds allot money to the state, for example, in that highway bill, and I'm just assuming that of that 300 billion, Pennsylvania gets 30 billion of that. And now, does Pennsylvania, who's the responsible party for the work being done in Pennsylvania? Is it still the Fed?
No.
It goes to the state.
Right. So Congress has appropriated funds to Pennsylvania to go and build roads or whatever the projects are that they've got. Pennsylvania will be responsible for issuing the contract, letting the contract. What I would tell you is that your contractor would have a contract with the state of Pennsylvania or some agency within the state of Pennsylvania. What your contractor should understand is that oftentimes state and even local and municipal procurement rules are mirrored on the federal side.
And that's where I was going to go. Is there a state process that's almost identical to the Fed process?
It's going to be very similar. It will have its own peculiarities in state to state and locality to locality, but why reinvent the wheel? So a lot of states and localities have said that works. We should emulate that. We should do something similar. So if you've gone through the process of registering for procurement work with the federal government, registering with the state won't take you much effort at all.
Is there anything else out there regarding the mechanics of becoming a federal/state vendor that you might want to mention?
There is one other thing. In that registration process, you'll be asked to register what is called a NAICS code, a North American Industry Classification System code. And there's a huge long list. And what it does is say, this is what I primarily do as a business. And it's a code that says, I'm a glazier. And what I do is glazing. And that's my primary. I might have a couple of others that I also register, but it allows the government to find you and say, well, I'm looking for glaziers. Well, they're going to look under that NAICS code for glaziers. And if you're not registered properly, the government's not going to find you. And that's important because government procurement officers have a responsibility to do market research before they put a contract out. They need to go and make sure they've got, ultimately, a contracting officer, before they sign, has to make a determination that the contract that they're awarding is fair and reasonable, and the price being paid is fair and reasonable. And you can do that in a variety of ways. Competition is a great one. So they will go out, look for companies that they can send a solicitation to, or a request for proposal, a request for quote, and they'll find those companies using a NAICS code. So it's really important that they properly identify themselves in that registration process under those NAICS codes.